Thank you, Mr. President. I'd like to first say thanks with great appreciation to the senator from California for her words. This is a time when we need to pull together. We've been there for other places, in Sandy and other things, and now it's time for the country to embrace Colorado, as my senior senator so eloquently said. And I know he may have to leave the floor, but I just want to say before he does how much I have appreciated his leadership in all of this. It's made a huge difference. You know, the work that's really being done is the work that's on the ground, as Senator Udall was saying. That's the most important work, the first responders, neighbors helping neighbors. But it also has been a time when our political leadership, I think, has come together in a way, at least for once, not to get in the way and actually to try to support the people that are just trying to serve their friends and neighbors. So I want to say thank you to Senator Udall, my senior senator and my friend, for his leadership. As he mentioned, our state is a long way from recovering from the floods that have inflicted so much damage over this month. The damage has been historic, Mr. President. Based on the latest estimates, over 16,000 homes have been seriously damaged. Thousands have been destroyed. The floodwaters consumed more than 2,000 square miles across Colorado's Front Range, an area about twice the size of Rhode Island. Just to give you some sense of the scale, it would be as if Rhode Island were completely underwater twice, or as Mark Udall said, Senator Udall said, as if it covered a state the size of Connecticut. And the floods have tragically killed at least 9 Coloradans. We hope that number won't go up, but we don't know whether it will or it won't. Over the weekend, I went to Jamestown, a small community about 14 miles northwest of Boulder, Colorado, and Tara Schettinger, the mayor of the town, showed me around. Mr. President, the damage to that one town was simply unbelievable. It was as if a bomb had gone off in the middle of this community. The flooding destroyed over a fifth of Jamestown's homes, half of its roads, both of its bridges, a central fire hall, and much, much more. The storm killed Joe Hallett, age 72, the beloved pillar of the Jamestown community. The mayor's house was right next to Joe's house, and the mayor's house is fine. Joe Hallett's house was destroyed by a mudslide that came down from the very top of the hillside, the very top of the mountain behind his house, killing somebody who has been the glue of that community. I got a couple of quick photos from the visit I want to share just to give you a sense of the scale of this damage. Mr. President, this used to be Main Street in Jamestown. You can see it passing between these two utility poles on either side of what is now a raging river. Main Street is gone. It's not the asphalt that's gone. The whole street, the roadbed is gone, and all that remains is a torrential river that ran in a bank completely, ran in a completely different place than it does today. This photo shows the end of Main Street in Jamestown. My deputy chief of staff took that picture. This is what Main Street used to look like. This is what Main Street in Jamestown, Colorado looks like as we stand on the floor of the United States Senate today. I will say, and my senior senator is still here, it was amazing, the resilience of the people in this community. The sense of humor that people had, the sense of community that they had. There were probably 30 people or so left out of a town of 300 people that had come back to see their belongings, that had come back to secure what was left of their homes. And what they were talking about was how they were going to rebuild this community together. And there were tears from time to time, as you naturally would expect there to be, but what really came through, as it always does in the back ends of these disasters, was the human spirit that we see in each one of our states. But we're particularly proud of the Coloradans that are struggling together to get through this incredibly difficult time. In my mind, these are the most heartbreaking pictures. People who have dedicated their lives to being able to secure a home for their families, who, by the way, had no expectation there and other parts of the state that they would ever be affected by a flood, and to see everything lost. One woman came up to me while I was there, and she said this was our house, which was in reasonably not, some decent shape compared to some others that I had seen. But then she had a rental property down the road in which she had invested her life savings. She has no flood insurance, and she said, I just don't know how we're not going to go broke as a result of this piece of bad luck. I also saw in Evans, Colorado, a rural community near Greeley in the northeastern part of the state, 2 trailer parks that have been entirely destroyed by floodwaters from a mile or mile and a quarter away. In the middle of one of these trailer parks, there was a cement pipe, Mr. President, that was about this tall, sitting underneath a carport. The thing must have weighed tons. It's huge culvert pipe that had come from a mile and a half away through these raging waters to position itself in this trailer park. And these people who live there, who work in agriculture in our state, who clean hotels in our community, who are working in our oil fields in northeastern Colorado. And I know that because there were a bunch of people when I went to the trailer park who, again, were assessing their damage. They have lost everything. And because they couldn't qualify for financing for those trailer homes, they bought them with cash. One person there said, Senator, it's awfully lucky this happened during the day and not at night, because our kids were at school during the day. And if they had been there at night, he didn't know how many of them would have been killed by these floodwaters. But in addition to the human dimension of all of this, which is the most important dimension, the flooding also inflicted enormously costly damage to Colorado's infrastructure. Over 200 miles of roads in Colorado have been affected by this flooding. The mountainous terrain in the state is going to make repair work exponentially more expensive and exponentially more difficult, and I salute our governor and everybody who's working to make sure that at least temporary roads are built to these communities in the next 90 days, which would otherwise be completely cut off. I have here a letter, Mr. President, from the Colorado Department of Transportation that estimates that the total damage just to Colorado's federally maintained roads and highways, these are not our local roads, these are our federally maintained roads and highways, will exceed $400 million, and I'd ask it to be entered into the record.
Without objection.
Thank you, Mr. President. Earlier this year, Congress passed funding for Federal Highway Administration emergency relief. States like Colorado that have been hit with a significant natural disaster are eligible for funding. Our state will be in desperate need of these funds, just as New Jersey was in desperate need and New York was in desperate need. The scale of the damage far exceeds what our state and local governments can cover. But as my senior senator said, there's a catch. There's a cap in the current law of $100 million per incident per state on the federal highway assistance. I have another letter, Mr. President, that I'll enter into the record from our governor, Hickenlooper, urging Congress to raise the current cap on emergency funding and explaining why this is something that Colorado desperately needs to be done. And Senator Udall and I have a simple bill that would raise the $100 million cap for Colorado for emergency funding for our highways, matching what Congress has done, as Senator Udall has said many times previously. In fact, as far as I know, every time that issue like this has arisen. We've already talked to the Congressional Budget Office about this. They've looked at the bill. They've told us that it will not cost the federal government one dime because the money is already there. It's already been appropriated. It just needs to be used for the purpose that Congress laid out, to help states with major disasters that inflicted cost damage on that state's highway system. Colorado needs this Congress to act, and act now to get this done so that Colorado can access the highway aid we will clearly need to recover in the coming months. By the way, Mr. President, this $100 million cap on emergency funding for the federal Highway Administration, as I mentioned earlier, has been lifted many, many, many times before. It is done routinely and swiftly by this Congress following other major disasters when it's obvious, as it is in our case, that federally maintained highway costs will exceed $100 million. We lifted it for the Sandy states, as I've pointed out, earlier this year when we passed the Sandy Supplemental on January 29, 2013. We lifted it on November 18th for Hurricane Irene and the Missouri River Basin flooding. We lifted it on September 30th, 2008 for Hurricanes Gustav and Ike. We lifted it on May 25th, 2007 for storms in the state of California. We lifted it on December 20th, 2005 for Hurricanes Dennis, Katrina, Rita, and Wilma. All told, Congress has waived this $100 million cap 14 times in the past 25 years. It is routine, it is normal when there's a major disaster that causes major highway damage in excess of $100 million. And Senator Udall and I have been working with our colleagues in the Senate. Nearly all of them have indicated a readiness to work with us to pass this bill, and I am very grateful for that. I also want to thank my colleagues for working with us to get this done quickly for Colorado in recognition of how badly we need this cap lifted and this federal funding made available. And I'd urge my colleagues to pull together and work with us to quickly clear this bill in the coming days so that we can get Coloradans the help they need. If you'll indulge me just a few more minutes, and the senator from California would as well, I want to just take a quick moment to show you why this is so important. Picture tells you 1,000 words. I want to show you, especially when I'm the one that's speaking, I want to show you the damage to Colorado highways as a result of this historic funding. This photograph was taken during a helicopter tour by Vice President Biden and Governor Hickenlooper and FEMA officials of flood damage in Greeley, Colorado earlier this week. You can see a huge portion of the road is washed away and the water has breached a dam. By the way, I want to say that FEMA has just been doing a tremendous job with our local and state officials. This is a section of Highway 72 that collapsed and washed away after a flash flood tore through Coal Creek near Golden, Colorado, which is outside of Denver. Or maybe in Golden they would say Denver's outside of Golden, but this is what the road looks like there. A bridge to the south side of the town of Lyons is gone. You can see these huge portions that have broken off. Maybe that's the bridge that's missing, Mr. President, right there. And this is another shot. Sorry, that's the bridge. And then here's another shot of large portions of US 34 washed away. I know the senator from California would like to speak, but I've got, is that all right? I've just got a couple more that I wanted to show you. Here's a very clear example of the way these mountain roads work. And in this case, you know, I mean, when the prospectors first came to Colorado, and what they would do is they would pan for gold at the bottom of the rivers and near the plains, and they'd see whether there was gold leaf there, and that would lead them to walk up these valleys, very steep valleys, and to see where the gold was coming from. And they founded towns in these places. And you know, that's the way the river came, and then the road followed the river, and that allowed them to get to their town. Well, you can see in this case, this road has been completely washed out by the river. This is just another instance of mountain roads where you can see below, the drop-off below what used to be road, but no longer is. Here's a roadway that is completely submerged in our state when this photo was taken, and with extensive damage. And then this ribbon of what used to be a ribbon of pavement just now fragments in the remaining water. In times of disaster in this country, we've stood together time and time again. and working on behalf of the people of Colorado with Senator Udall, that's what we're asking for again. We've pulled together with all of you, and we're going to need all of you to pull together with us. You know, the Founding Fathers had a lot of work to do, and they're often quoted around this place, but they were engaged in founding a country, not dismantling one, and this is a reminder of why their vision was so important and why people, frankly, are counting on us to carry this on for this generation of Americans and for the generations that will follow us. Mr. President, with that, I say thank you for your indulgence, and I yield the floor.